For the block bump, what we're going to do is set up the function types. The first one that we want to do, let's go ahead and just call up our function for onTriggerEnter. So we'll do an onTriggerEnter. That means that when the player comes over and actually hits and enters into this collision, that we'll set up the trigger for it to check for whether it's the head box. If you remember, inside the player, I'll go over here and just show you real fast. Inside the player has one which is for his head. This is the collision box head, and we've actually made it a little bit smaller. That way, when the player walks over it, he's really got to make sure he hits just right inside that area. He can't just, if you make it really wide, then he can hit like 2 or 3 at a time. So the smaller you make it, the more exact the player has to be when they hit the block to make it actually play the animation or play the action that's going to occur. So inside of here, we'll do an onTriggerEnter. We'll set it up as a standard other with a collider on it. Alright, so we'll have this one. We need to have a start. We'll go ahead and do a function for start, and the start function is just going to be to initialize some of our properties and things. So we've got the TriggerEnter, we've got a start, and we have the update. We'll use just those 3 functions. We're going to store a lot of information inside the update to make it I would say probably the long run, when you start really refining your code, you're definitely going to want to take it all out of the update and actually just make separate function calls for it. But for us, we're just keeping it simple as we can. So we're just going to say everything goes into the update function, and then also everything happens from our TriggerEnter. When the player first starts walking over here, go ahead and just click on play. Is that when I come over to the side right here and I actually go and try to hit the block, notice nothing actually happens. We just simply jump up and hit the block. Well, let's make sure that we actually have first is that we can get the head block to register. So inside of our onTriggerEnter, we'll just go over and say that the first thing we want to do is check for other tag, and we want to make sure that its name, if its name, is equal to the collision box head. So we'll say collision box head. I think that was the right name for it. Collision box head, yeah, right there. Alright, so we'll say if other tag name is equal to the collision box head. Let's go ahead and set up some properties here. We'll start off by just saying print head hit. Alright, so we'll check for a quick head hit, make sure that it actually does work. So when we hit, we get the message, head did hit the block. That means that we have the access that we need to it. So we go ahead and comment this out. And working through this, my normal way of working through this, and it may be something that's helpful for you, is that quite often I'll just check I'll do a quick print just to make sure everything actually does work, and then start filling in code for it. What we want to have happen is just set the animation, the block animation, to actually true, so that it plays the animation when you hit it. We'll do that one so that, for instance, we'll set it up like this. We'll say our block ANI, which is our Boolean statement here. It was currently set to false, so we're actually going to make it set to true. Alright, and this one, I'll go ahead and just comment on the side. This is going to enable our block animation. Alright, and remember the animation file that we currently have inside of our project. There's the animation folder. There's a block bounce. And remember the block bounce? Here, we'll go ahead and take a look at it so you can see it. Inside of Windows, if you go down to your animation window, the animation window in here, let me go ahead and go into the block. Go. So our block animation moves the object up, moves the object back down. This is just moving up and down on the y-axis. Notice it's the green one. If I play this one, notice my block goes up, goes back down. So that's all we're doing right there. We're just going to play this animation. Okay, so back to here. If we have this one and we say block animation is going to be equal to true. Alright, well, just as a quick check, just to make sure it's going to work for us, go into your function update. Alright, so inside the function update, let's go ahead and just make a simple if statement. We're going to say if block ANI is equal to true, then let's go ahead and do something with it. So if block animation is true, then let's actually just play the block animation file. Alright, so in our for being able to play an animation, this is probably the first time we actually play an animation, I think, from our videos, other than just the initial time we did it, is showing it. But this one, whenever you want to play an animation file, remember you're just going to be calling up animation dot, and we'll say play. And you have several different types of play options. We're just going to do the standard play. And with this one, we're going to call up the string name. So our string name for our animation was called block bounce. Alright, and you'll also notice inside of the animation component, you have the, double check inside of here, you have a size of 1. The element first one is called block bounce. So we're going to use that one. We'll just put it in quotes and call this one block bounce. There we go. And the animation.play is going to actually play that animation for us when the character hits on that trigger. Along with that one, if we actually just, when we finish this block animation piece there, then let's go ahead and call up animation, the block animation, equal it to false. That way he hits it once, it plays the animation once, and then it stops. Alright, so let's go ahead and save this. And if we go back into here and press play, so when our player comes over and we jump and hit, then it's actually going to bounce the block up, and then it's going to stop. Alright, so pretty cool already. This actually feels like, kind of looks like the Mario style, where the block bounces every time he hits it. Alright. So we have our block bounce working for us. Now this is just simply to make sure we know that we can use it and we can actually work with it. We're going to have different, again, with the different state types, it's not always going to be a block bounce. Like with the ones that break, it'll be a different type that actually occurs for it. But but being able to make the bounce and being able to call up the animation, that part is going to work for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and start in on our switch and case statements. We can keep this. For instance, I could actually, let's see, we'll just put that below. So we'll start off with our first part in our update. The update function, let's go ahead and start off with a switch and a case statements. Again, if you feel comfortable with your switch case statements, then you may find yourself just jumping straight to it. However, if you don't, then just work on if statements. Create an if statement as a check for something, create another if statement for checking on the different block types, and then eventually move those into a switch and a case statement. For us, the switch statement is going to be our block state. So it's whatever our current block state is at. So if you remember, let's go back up here. Block state is actually, the type is going to be the block type. So this means that we'll be able to choose what type we're going to be using. So for instance, in the inspector, if you notice over here on the side, we've got a lot of properties that we actually have available to us over here. The block state, if you click on the drop down, that means that whatever I choose right here, so say for instance I did the block coin or the block bounce, whatever that option is, inside of the switch statement, is going to say, okay, your block bounce, go to the first case statement that says whether it's the block bump or block coin, and it goes to that case statement and does the code inside of it and executes those. Alright, so for this one we have the switch checking for that. Let's go ahead and set up our case statements inside it. Alright, so the first case statement we'll have is going to be the block state, and it's going to be checking for, we'll go ahead and make a copy of this, it's going to be checking for the block bounce. Alright, and we'll do a break on it. Oops. And the next one we'll do is just going to be the case block state. This one's going to be our block coin. Oops. Looks like we can't get that one in there. And the next state, this one. So we've got our block bounce, we have our block coin. Just jump back up here. This is going to be the block breakable, then solid question. So we'll do block breakable. And then block solid, and then block question. And we can actually just, so it's a little bit easier to read. And we also have our last one, which would be block question. Okay, so we have our case statements, we've got our breaks. This will give us all the different type of block states we could actually go through. So again, remember, if you're actually wanting to create additional block types, this is where you would add it. You would add an enumeration up here, and then inside of here, you'd actually define the block state as one of the cases, and then create code that's going to support that. Alright, so again, let's go ahead and start off our block bounce. The block bounce that we have, we want to do very similar to what we had before right up here. We'll go ahead and just copy this code. Actually, wait, where'd the code go? Right there. Alright, so down here, the if block animation, let's go ahead and just cut this one. And inside of the block state bounce, let's actually paste this in and set it up right. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do when we're creating all the blocks is actually check on the material type, make sure it's actually representing the right type for us. So we'll go ahead and say, again, if you remember, getting the right render.material, this will pull up the right one for it. Our block, our material block, let's see, the material block for a bounce, that's going to be the regular brick. So we'll do material block 1 for it. Alright, so we'll say, we'll do material block 1, and that'll be the first one that we use. So if you ever choose for the block state for the bounce, it'll automatically go to this one. Alright, and then we're going to say that we'll check, once we've assigned the right material, we'll just double check that the animation is actually true to play the animation file, and then reset it to false for the animation playing again. Also, let's go ahead and do an audio play. So we'll do audio play right here. And the audio play, what we're doing with this is actually going to be setting it to play the bump sound. Alright, so let's go ahead and finish off that part. And then outside of it, we can just do our, we'll just do our break. So we've got, and if you wanted to have a particle actually created from there, you could also place in a particle here. But like for this one, all it is just bouncing a block up and down. So there's no real direct need to actually have a particle file actually instantiating in there. So with this, we've got our basic set the material type. And then we've got to check if the animation is true, meaning the players actually hit it up here. And if it is, then it'll play, and it'll also set it to false, and it'll play the audio file. Alright, pretty simple, straightforward on that one. Let's go ahead and drop in some comments for it. So for the block state, we'll just say this is going to be the switch statement. That looks, switch statement looks for current block type. And for the first case, it's going to be the bounce up down playing animation. Move this over a little bit here. I'll go ahead and say that this is going to be setting material type to block 1 material. And check if block animation is true. And if it is true, then play the block bounce animation file. Alright, and then set to false, which is basically saying stop animating. And then we have play audio file for bump. Okay, so basic setup right there. Let's go ahead and jump inside of here real quick. We've got a lot of variables that are actually asking for things. The only one that we actually need right now, though, is the material block 1. So let's go ahead and go in here and grab the right material for it. I'm just going to go in here and click on this one. That way it'll point me to the right one right there. I'm just going to left click and drag this one over to block 1. Oh, actually we need to make sure we grab the material type for it. So let's see. We'll go up to materials. And let's go down to blocks. Let's see where the blocks are. And we've got the bricks. So brick type 1. And let's see, we'll move that into material block 1. I believe it's the same one. Let's see. And 1, 2, and 3. Close to. We'll double check on it. Alright, so if we have this one set in, the only other thing we need to do is put in the sound file as well. So all I've done is just taken the brick type. We'll double check that we got the right. Let's just make sure. And, there it is, brick 3. Okay. So, block is going to be the tile brick 3. We'll go into material block 1. That'll work for us. And then for the sound, we got a little sound bump file right there. Let's go up to audio. And we should have a Mario bump right here. Just drag that into the sound bump. So when you play this one, we go in here and we play it. Again, we still have our on trigger enter, so when it hits this one, it actually registers that it was hit. It turns on the block animation right here. The block itself is set to block bounce, and the after state is block bounce. So that means that when the player hits it, it's always going to be just the bounce object. Alright, so you could also set up like a bigger scheme of things as well, as you could be checking for the player type, and if the player is small, then it would be that all the blocks are actually in bounce state, and they actually won't break on them. Alright, so we've got that. Let's go ahead and actually just, while we're doing this, let's go ahead and just fill in all of these elements here. Sound pickup, let's go ahead and do this one. So inside of the Mario audio, let's see, we've got coin pickup. Let's find that one. There we go. Mario pickup right here. We'll go ahead and drag that over to it. And then let's just drag and drop all the parts and pieces for the different types for these. Let's see. Our material types we've got. Let's see. The second one is going to be the solid block. So materials. Going back down to here. We have is the solid. So tile brick to solid. We'll drag that one into the second one. The third one's asking for piece block. This one, we'll go ahead and just use the same one that we did for that first one. So we'll just do the third, tile brick 3. And then the last one is the question box. So if we just find our question box tile. Alright, and then the pickup coin. We have a pickup coin as a prefab. So if you go down to your prefab types, just look for the prefab block. Let's see. Block type coins. I believe that'll be the right one. Let's make sure. Oh, actually this will be the whole setup. Let's find just the single one here. Alright, so back to our block. This one, pickup coin. Let's see if we have the pickup type. Pickup coin block. There we go. So the prefab pickup coin block. Just move over to pickup coin right here. And then the grow and life. Pick up mushroom grow. And pick up mushroom life. And then the fire flower. So the pick up fire flower right here. Breakable geometry pickup is going to be the pickup. Let's see where it's at. You'll probably notice that even like what I'm doing right now, when you start getting a lot of them, it can take a little bit of time just to sort through, find the right spot where everything's at. This one, we got the breakable geometry up towards the top of it, and right below we've got the particle. Alright, so that sets us up with all of those parts and pieces to it. What we could do, just to make sure it stays consistent in terms of what's filled in right here, I'll just go up and click on the apply for the prefab. That's going to make sure that all of those are applied to anything that's a prefab from the rest of our scene types that we load up. Okay, so we have all of those. Let's jump back into the code here. we were starting in on our update function, and inside of the update we have our switch. Each case is actually going to be defining things. We've done the first one, which is just simply calling up the animation for it and calling up a sound file. The next one that we have is actually the block coin. Let's go ahead and work this one over. Let's go ahead and go in here in the block state coin area, and what we're going to be looking for on this one is similar to the other one in terms of the check for whether or not there was whether the block animation was true. So we'll say if block animation is true, and if it is true, then what we want to do is similar to the other one. We want to go ahead and just start off by saying play the animation bounce. So we'll say animation.play, and the play type that we'll do for it again will be like the other one. We'll just do block bounce. Alright, so once we play the block bounce, we do want to create something from it though. So this time around, actually when we hit it, we want to have the coin actually come up. Now remember, part of our types that we had over here, we did the, let's see where it was, pick up coin, the prefab on this one. So we actually want to create, when we hit it, we want to instantiate that object above it. So we'll start off by just creating it here. So let's go ahead and just right below this, once we actually hit the block and it bounces up, then we'll make a coin variable inside of here, and we'll just create the instantiate, and it's going to get our pickup coin. And the pickup coin is its position right now. We'll just do the transform position and transform rotation. So this would be directly in this exact same spot. So when you hit it, the coin will just be created right here. Alright, so we'll start off with that. We'll probably need to correct it and kind of make some adjustments for it. Alright, and then we'll go ahead and turn our block animation to false. And then we also want to make the block coin amount. So right here, our block coin amount is currently set, say for instance, to 3. If we wanted, every time we hit it, we want it to go down 1, then we just want to subtract from itself. So we'll just say block coin amount. So there we go. The block coin amount just minus minus. So we're just going to subtract 1 every time Mario hits the block. Alright, so once we have the subtraction happening right there, we'll go ahead and just play our audio clip. The audio clip we could use what we've been doing, which is calling up our, if we remember from our other ones, we had the little function call we were making for play sound. We could do that one. If it's a simple enough call that all you have to do is call one file or 2 files up, then you could even do it this way where we're just calling it direct. We're just going to say audio.clip. So we're going to load the sound bump onto it, and then we'll just play the audio play here. Okay, so this will load our audio clip onto it, and then this will play it. Alright, now that's basically all we have to actually have for the coin, for the current state. Now we're going to have to go back to this one a little bit later and actually work over the block state after, and double check for all the different types it could change into. So for instance with this one, it could very easily, the different after states could be the block bounce, it could do the block break, and it could do the block solid. So you have several different after states it could be. We're not going to do that one just yet. We want to make sure that this one currently works. So we'll go ahead and save this out, and let's go ahead and go back to here. Now when we create it this time, let's double check that we got the right, let's make sure we do rotation on here. There we go. And when the character walks over to it, we'll go ahead and hit. Now notice inside our hierarchy, I'll go ahead and move this up here. So for the hierarchy, if I hit, I've got one. It actually does a block, but the only issue is when it does the block, nothing's actually being let me show you right here. Alright, so we don't actually have anything pulling out from it. Since our block itself right now on the type over here, we're just calling a variable holding it. If we actually wanted to instantiate it, let's go ahead and do it this way. I'm just going to set it up so it instantiates immediately right here, just so you can see on this part. And then we'll talk about it here. Okay, so if we hit it, we actually get to create and instantiate an object from it. And once we instantiate the object, so let's see, where's our object at? Looks like it's actually not instantiating. Let's double check, make sure we're actually doing it right here. Actually, the instantiation is not the issue. Let's make sure we go over to our block bump script over here. And what we want to do is on the block state, we want to change it from bounce to coin. There we go. So once we have it set to coin, that way when we go over and we hit, we'll actually create the coin from it. And notice on our block coin amount, we also have 2. So if I hit it once more, it goes down to 1. Hit it once more, it goes down to 0. Alright? And each one of those, if you notice, because of where we're instantiating it from at the moment, it's actually instantiating from this position. And what we want it to actually do, though, oops, let's make sure we grab the right one. And what we want it to do is actually instantiate above the object and also move up from the object. The moving up part we can set up as a separate script on this object, but for where it's being created, we need to make sure it's being created in the right spot. Okay, and we also don't want it to be created exactly at the depth right here, which is on the Z. We don't want it to be created in the exact same spot as the brick, but we want it to be created slightly behind it. Alright, so let's go ahead and go into there and actually work that part over. I'm going to go ahead and drop back in, drop the... Oh, here, we'll leave it open for a moment, and then we'll put the coin back onto it. For our starting position, we have the coin position on our vector 3. Let's go ahead and assign that inside of the start function. So inside of here, let's see, we'll just go ahead and type in coin position. So it's a vector 3. And we'll do we're just going to equal it to, we'll start off here. So vector 3. And the vector 3 type that we'll use for this one, we'll just do the transform dot position dot x. The only one, the part that we're going to affect on this part will just be the z. So we'll go ahead and set the transform position x and y just to the standard for this. So we'll say transform position dot y, and then the transform dot position dot z. Alright, and for this one, we want to actually add, we're going to add a plus 0.2. And this is just basically setting the coin so it comes out slightly behind what's created. It's going to be slightly behind the block brick right there. Alright, so we'll do that one. This is going to be our coin position. Okay. Now, if we have this one set up for a vector 3, that means that when we're down inside of our block state coin, when we instantiate it, instead of doing the transform position, we're actually just going to set it to our coin position right here. Alright, now when we go back into the game and we play it, let's move him over when he hits it. This time when he hits, notice where it creates. So it's now creating it slightly behind the other object. And then once we have that set up, we could go to our into our actual coin piece, so that when it's created, the only thing it does is go straight up on a transform. So it's on the Y transform, it just starts to move upward until it gets to either a certain distance, or we could even set it for a time before it actually goes away. Alright? So there we go. So that's going to actually create our first state for us and put everything into the right place. So we have our, there we go, we have our coin position set in place for the position on the transform. Everything else should be working pretty well for the block coin state. Again, we'll have to come back and work over the block, the block after state. That way we actually set everything right for any other options for it. The next one we want to do is the block breakable. For the block breakable, let's go ahead and go in here. What we want to place in for this one, let's go ahead and just call up, again, the block breakable one, we want to call up the texture for it. The block coin, we could also call up our texture. We forgot to do that, didn't we? Yeah. Let's set up the texture type for this. Z. Okay, so we'll set these two to the same, since they're actually just the same brick texture. The breakable one, again on the breakable type, this will be the same as the other two. It's going to start off that way, but when it ends, it'll actually change to a, whether it's the geometry or the particle, it'll change to those. Alright, so for the breakable type, what do we need from it? We need to check to see if the animation's actually, the block animation is true, meaning that Mario's hit his head on top, onto the block. So we'll say that if the block ANI is true, then do something inside of it. Alright, and what we want to do for this one, we want to go ahead and just play the animation play, and we'll do the bounce. Oops, make sure we do the block bounce here. Block bounce. Alright, and once we do the block bounce on the breakable type, let's go ahead and check for which type we have, so whether or not we're using the geometry one, or whether we're using the particle one. So let's do a couple of checks inside of here. We'll say if break state, and our break state, remember the break state up here, we have our break state is equaling the break type, and the break type is going to be breakable geometry or breakable particles. So let's go ahead and set up for both of those. Alright, so if the break state right here is going to be equal to, and this is going to be saying whether or not it's equal to the break state breakable geometry. So break state dot, oops, breakable geometry. So if it's equal to that, then we'll want to instantiate this type of an object for it. And you could do the following here. So we could say it's going to instantiate an object here, and at the same time, we can do another check, and we can say if break state is going to be equal to the break state dot breakable, and this will be particles, and double check that it's actually particles right there. Okay. So we're doing a check for both of those. If it's either one's true, and let's fill in the different types. One's going to instantiate the particle, and one's going to instantiate the actual geometry objects. Alright, so with this one, let's set it so that it's going to instantiate, we'll say it's the breakable geometry. And for the position as well, just like the coin, we don't necessarily want to create it right on. If we create it right on, we'll probably notice that there are going to be some issues. So we'll go ahead and set up the, we'll go ahead and just set up what it needs to work. For this one, let's go ahead and go up to the top right here. This is something that after we test it out, you realize that we actually need to move the breakable pieces forward or backward, because remember, when they break at the moment, if they were to break, they would actually break and fall onto the ground plane, the collision box right here. What we're going to do is actually move them forward so that they actually break and they fall away from the collision area. So in terms of setting it up, let's go ahead and change for the position for the breakables. We'll call up our breakable position, and the breakable position will be a vector 3. And just like the other one, we're just going to arrange the pieces a little bit differently here. So we're going to say transform position X and then transform position Y. The Y though, so think about it when we're hitting it this time around, something that we've done before, where we just move like where we moved the coin inward. Well, this one we need to move them a few places here. So for instance, on this we'll do the Y, but we're actually going to add to the height, so that that little height when the player hits and the animation moves upward, well, it's actually at the higher part of it. That's where we want the break to actually occur. So we'll move up just a little bit on this one. So we're just going to add about a 0.25 to it. Alright, and then we'll do the transform position for the Z. And for the Z, let's go ahead and move this one into the screen. So we're going to actually move it inward, closer to the camera, so that it's actually off away from the collision down below it. Alright, so if we have those, that'll give us our breakable, let's see, it's called breakable position. So inside of our block breakable right here, we'll just instantiate the geometry, and then we'll set it to that position right there. So let's just say breakable position, Alright, and then we'll set the transform to the same, for the rotation, we'll set it to the same as the object. Alright, so we have our first one. The next one, this will be the geometry one. So the next one, if we choose it from our states, then we'll instantiate a particle effect here. And for this one, we'll say breakable particles. And for the position of it, we actually don't need it to go where it was from before on that one. We'll just call it directly up from the current position. So we'll just say transform dot position, and we'll do transform rotation. Okay, so that'll actually set us up for the particles. The particles can be created right there on the same one, because when this disappears, then the particles showing, everything should work out okay for that. Alright, so let's see, that should finish us up with the basic breakable types. We'll be able to choose from each one, and then make something happen from it. The last part on this, in order to make sure that everything disappears the way it should, let's go ahead and destroy the object. So once the breakable is finished off and we've actually created we've instantiated the parts and pieces from it, then we can destroy the parent. So if you remember, this is part of the thing of just when you test things out. If you do just a regular destroy game object, it's only going to destroy this object, because this is where the script's being assigned to, but it won't destroy the parent object up here. So in order to destroy the parent and the child object, we just want to say transform, destroy the transform parent dot game object. And that'll make sure that it cleans up everything inside of it from the parent down. Alright, and then the last thing we want to do, and that'll finish all the things up for us inside of here, is we set our block animation to false. Alright, so that will double check. We've got to instantiate through here and all the way through there. Yep. So that'll take it. So if something happens, if the player hits the block, and one of the states is either breakable geometry or particles, and then it'll actually instantiate them in the right positions, and after that destroys the whole object. And that should be enough time that once it's actually destroyed, it'll destroy it so that once it's off the screen, and then we turn it to false so that it only does it once. Alright, let's go ahead and save this. Go into Unity, and for the block type, for this one, be sure you have block selected inside of the block bump script. Change the block state instead of the coin, change it to block breakable. Alright, and for the breakable type, if you notice the break state, we have breakable geometry and breakable particles. Let's go ahead and do both. We'll do the first one as geometry here. Alright, so when the player comes over and he hits the block, it actually goes and breaks into that geometry piece. And then notice it stayed for a bit and it disappeared from the hierarchy. Alright, we'll play it once. Actually, let's see, we'll change the block type now. We'll just go in here and change the block state, break state right here, and we'll change it to breakable particles. Alright, so now when the player comes across and hits, it's actually going to change into breakable particles. So notice the difference between the two. We had one that was just the particle effect happening, and one as actual geometry. Alright, and that gives us all of our basic setup for the block breakable right there. We can go ahead and go down into the break state solid now. And for the break state solid, let's go ahead and just set up the rendering for it. Again, similar to this one, this is going to be different when it comes to the rendering the material block that we use. So we'll use the render.material, and it's going to be equal to material block, and let's double check which one it was. Material block on this one for the solid block is number 2. So if we go down here, we'll just say material block number 2. That way, whenever you assign, for instance, we could go ahead and we could save, and if we were to go over here and click on this object on the block type, if we change the block state to block solid, when you play it, it's automatically going to switch the texture for it, so the material now is the block solid piece. Now, for this at the moment, it actually won't play the animation bumping up and down, because we're not actually going to want to call that up to it. It'll be a solid block, so it won't be moving. So let's go ahead and keep working on this. Now, we want to be able to actually get some information from it, meaning that when the player comes over and hits his head on it, we want to get the statement whether it's true or false. So we'll say that if the player does hit it, so we'll say if block animation is true, that inside our block animation, what we're going to be looking for is not the, we're not going to be looking to play the animation file. We're just going to be using this so that we can actually set up our audio file. So we'll say audio clip. We'll load the clip type, which will be sound bump. And for the sound bump, we'll take the audio and just do the play on it. Alright, and when we play it, it'll just play that audio bump sound, so when he hits his head on it, it'll just do the little bump noise. Alright, and then once we've done that, we can set our block animation equal to false. Okay. And at that state, that's actually all you need to do for the block solid. So if we go over here and we click on it, and what you should notice is that when you play it, you should be able to hear the sound. So there should be a sound playing. It just plays that block sound bump, and then it just continues that way. Alright. So after that point, then the next state that we have is going to be our block question. We'll take a just a short break here, and then we'll start in on the block question, and then we'll also come back and start fleshing out the block state after.